Good morning. Welcome. My name is Pete Smith. I serve as the Chief Analytics and Data Officer here at UTA. And I have to tell you, it is delightful to say that word welcome. After nearly a year of planning and thousands of hours behind the scenes, to have you all on campus is a real treat for us. So, yes, on behalf of UTA, I'm going to read our land acknowledgement and then a few words from our president to start us off this morning. First, I will do the land acknowledgement. UT Arlington respectfully acknowledges the Wichita and affiliated tribes upon whose historical homelands this university is located. Their ancestors resided here for generations before being forcibly displaced by U.S. settlers and soldiers in the mid-1800s. We recognize the historical presence of the Caddo Nation and other tribal nations in the region, the ongoing presence and achievements of many people who moved to this area during the Indian relocation program of the 1950s and 60s, and the vital presence and accomplishments of our Native students and faculty and staff. Our president, Dr. Jennifer Calley, had hoped to be here to introduce the meeting and UTA in person. She was not able to join us this morning and sends her sincere regrets, but I have a few comments to share with you from her. She is as excited as I am to welcome you this morning. Let me read President Calley's words. I'm honored to welcome you to the University of Texas at Arlington for this year's International Conference on Learning, Analytics, and Knowledge. I was told that this is your first in-conference meeting, or in-person conference since the start of the pandemic, and we are, as I said, truly honored that you've decided to host it on our campus. We'd also like to extend our welcome to President-elect of SOLAR, Dr. Reintis, and the entire executive of SOLAR, in addition to the membership who join us today. You may not know that the University of Texas in Arlington is an R1, a Research 1 institution, a very high research level university, and our distinguished faculty across campus have brought us to that distinction. We are also a founding member of SOLAR, and we've been an institutional member from the beginning, I'm very proud that she can say. And so our expert research faculty and staff are joining you. I know you will see many UTA name badges this afternoon. The digitization of learning and education is generating unprecedented amounts of data, and the nuanced and exciting analysis of this data has already resulted in the transformation of many industries, and as we all know, higher education will not be immune to those changes. We at UTA embrace and are critically focused on building our capacity locally and then working with all of you nationally and internationally to use data and analytics to improve all aspects of society, including research and education. Data democratization is at the core of what we do. Such wonderful words. I enjoy reading those and hearing them from our president. And we have invested a great deal into our institution's reporting, data science, analytics, and learning analytics across a wide variety of data and learning models which daily support our leadership and administrators across campus. We would also like to recommend or recognize one of our faculty who is also a SOLAR leader, Professor George Siemens. I don't know where George is sitting today, hiding probably in the back. There he is. The president wanted to note him not only as a leader in SOLAR, but a leader in our faculty as well, currently in the Department of Psychology here at UTA. As many of you know, George served as the inaugural SOLAR president and has been active in the growth of our organization over the past decade. Under George's leadership, we are also one of the few institutions in the United States with a master's degree specifically in learning analytics. So among the many UTA name badges you see today will be graduate students from our own program. And one of the things I know we are especially proud of is SOLAR and its focus on the graduate students who will be the future of our profession. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the many partners who funded research, teaching, and learning analytics opportunities on campus. Many of you may not know that funding from sources such as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, from the Boeing Foundation, and Intel have helped and supported our efforts across campus. Thank you again for being here. Data and analytics will have an impact and are having an impact on a daily basis. They support what we do as an institution. They support our students and learners in all of their diversity. So thank you. We unfortunately couldn't have Professor Callie here, President Callie here, but certainly on behalf of her, we'd like to welcome you all to UTA. Now for some conference logistics, I'm going to ask Justin to come up and say a few words about logistics.
Well, to those on our live stream, good afternoon and good evening, and to everyone that's here, good morning. Welcome you to University of Texas at Arlington. Excited to have everybody here, and excited to see people in person after 4 years of being fully online. So we're just excited to have everybody and welcome you to the campus. If you've not, in terms of some of the logistics, UTA Guest is the best way to be able to log into our campus network while you are here. We do have Eduroam, but if you do have any issues with it, the UTA Guest is the best way to do it. It just requires name and email. So do find that when you are doing that. If you have any questions, please come talk to the organizing team. I don't think it's refreshed the slides. You know what? Do you have that? Let's refresh it. Yep. Sorry, some slight changes were made to the deck. And it is not in English. It's all good. Well, you know.
We're in Tex-Mex States. So.
Here we go. Just do that.
It's also in Spanish.
Yes, there we go. All righty. Back to it. Just want to let everybody know that the main conference is going to take place here in the SEER building. We have downstairs and upstairs. We have 2 floors. We'll have a number of different also events that will take place in this space. The lunch will take place in the University Center, which is the Connections Cafe. We'll have people that can help direct you over there. If you do have any mobility accessibility requirements, please come talk to Nicole or the organizing team. We'll make sure we have some carts that could be available to help with that. We'll have coffee breaks throughout the mornings and afternoons. So definitely take advantage of those. And we have breakfast each morning this week. Also, in terms of our shuttles, the schedule is available in Hoover. There'll be schedules, there'll be sessions that you can go if you need to be able to come to and from, that you can see that. So please consult Hoover, or again, please talk to the organizing team if you have any questions. It's under the resources tab in Hoover. So I'm gonna pitch it over to Nicole here. I did want to say one quick thing. If you did not get a drink ticket or a dinner ticket and you signed up for the conference dinner on Thursday, please find Nicole as well. Thank you.
The conference dinner tickets should have been in your zipper pouch, so if you haven't checked on that. So you should have a conference dinner ticket and then 2 drink tickets. If you're missing your drink tickets, please come see us. Okay, thanks everybody for being here and being back in person and having some grace for us as we get back into the swing of things for a face-to-face conference. If you've joined us over the past 3 years online, you should be quite familiar with Hoover, Zoom, and GatherTown. We are going to be using kind of the same thing as we're having our online participants. We have close to 200 who are joining us online throughout the week. I'm sending important announcements, any shuttle changes. If you have an urgent question, there's the Ask Organizers tab, and we're always attentive to those questions and concerns there. If you miss a session, if you have 2 conflicting sessions that you really want to see, and for face-to-face or online, recordings will be available, hopefully in a timely fashion. Once that session is over, it's not going to be as immediate as we were online because there's the video processing feed of the videos here on campus. So here's just, if you're new to Hoover, this is what you'll see on the web app. Find your agenda. You can add to my agenda. And you have a personal agenda. We have the sessions. You click into the sessions, and you can view all of the papers that are within that session. All remote sessions are going to be accessed via Whova. If you're a presenter and you're presenting online, you should have received an email from LAK23@gmail.com with your Zoom link. If you have not received that, please email me. GatherTown, there's the password LAK-2023. We will be having some network meetups in there. Our virtual advisory group, Paul, Biljana, Vanessa, and Kath, they are having some sessions in there to debrief and for different time zones. So if you want to chat about the keynotes, the debate, anything, they're there at those specific times within the Whova agenda. And you can find that link on the left navigation menu. This is what you're going to see if you're joining us online. Those are not going to be available until the stream is opened. If you have a question, use the Q&A in Whova. And this is super, super important. I've sent a reminder, but all presenters, if you are presenting face-to-face or online, you must be in your presentation rooms 15 minutes before that whole session block starts. That's going to allow the session chairs to run through all the transitions and how they're going to run the session. You'll get your slides over to the video production team, and we'll get all of our ducks in a row before the session begins. The poster and demo fire hose session is today. We're going to hear from 46 in-person poster and demos. They'll have 30 seconds to prove that you should come talk to them later today. Posters, if you had them printed locally, they were delivered. Come see us at the registration desk, and we'll be setting those up from 3 to 4 if you're a poster presenter. Any questions, come see me, or you can find Joanna and Izumi. This is the online poster session that's going to be taking place tomorrow, 4:30 to 5:30 Central. We encourage all face-to-face participants to participate. All poster and demo presenters will be online to discuss further, and the voting booth for the best poster and best demo are within the GatherTown space. So I encourage you to walk around there and meet with your online colleagues. This is the overall GatherTown map. It's very similar if you've joined us over the past 2 years. We have the main space, the poster and demo, and then those extra networking spaces. And if you're joining us online, within the agenda, if there's a meetup, there is a specific location that you should try to find. If this is our first hybrid LAK, so tips to engagement, join all the sessions that you can online and face-to-face, take a break in GatherTown, create virtual meetups within Whova. I've seen a lot of people creating face-to-face meetups in there. Do it for the online as well, the community boards, and just really engage and take advantage of this week. Certificates of attendance, if you need one, want one, or just curious to have one, we're going to send it out on the last day on Friday automatically. That's a new feature of Whova's that I'm excited to use. And Pete is going to say one more thing.
Before we move into the content portion today, we did want to say thanks. I wasn't kidding when I said thousands and thousands of hours go into the planning of a meeting like this. We've been preparing for our guests by collecting Texas memorabilia and all the UT gear or Texas gear you could possibly imagine. And we're going to note this morning, Nicole and Nina, you've both met them. Please join me in thanking them, and we're going to give them Texas gift bags to try and get through airport security on their way home. And she's being modest. There's one for Grace as well, of course. Bart and Isabel, could you come up front as well? You're going to also take some Texas gear back through airport security.
Now we have special ones for Isabel.
Thank you. Oh, I have name tags.
And a special one for Bart, and they are personalized. So we've been doing research. Yvonne, you get something special after you talk if you're good.
And we're going to get a picture of Grace in her cowboy hat, you wait. Bart, we're going to turn the microphone over to you. Thank you again. Welcome.
Thank you.
So it's a great pleasure to see you here face to face, and it's a great pleasure for those who are online. And it's a great pleasure to welcome Maren and Joshua to the conference. Maren, our current president, unfortunately, as you can see, has a very good reason not to be able to here, but she is joining us online, so I'm just waving to you online. So thank you so much for joining LAK. As Nicole said, we're all learning because we will make mistakes over the next couple of days, but don't be grumpy. Go and talk to us. If there's something that you don't like, tell us. If you online people, if there's something you don't like, let us know, because we're all learning. We're in a new situation, but we're hoping to basically make sure that you get the best experience either online or face to face. So a huge thanks to Grace, Justin, Pete, George, and Nicole. And unfortunately, both Hassan and Shane, who were the program chairs, couldn't be able to make it in person. But also a huge thanks to Isabel. Without you guys, we wouldn't be here. But there is an amazing group of people. I'm not going to name everyone, but there's an amazing group of people who will be helping out with the practitioner chairs, the workshop chairs, the proceeding chairs, the poster and demo chairs, the doctor consortium chairs, and we even have a virtual advisory group. So can I just give a big hands up for So let's look numbers. We're all at a Learning Analytics conference, and of course we're interested in numbers. And it was a big gamble for us. We wouldn't know if the room would be empty or whether there would be a couple of people. But the numbers look pretty good if you think about this. 539, that's the better number than pre-COVID, which is great. And another thing which is really interesting is we're slowly seeing an uptick of the non-traditional North American European group. So there's 7 people from Asia, which is fantastic. And also from South America, we see an increasing number of people. We also see a nice mixture between people who are online and people who are face-to-face, which is great. And for some reason, Europeans are more likely to be online than Americans, which is logical, I guess. But it's great. So another great number, and this is a shocking number in a way when we first saw it. There are 312 newbies here, people who have never been to LAK before. So could you please raise your hand if you've never been to LAK? Okay, keep your hand up, because what I want to do now is a 30-second speed dating. Keep your hands up. For those who have been here before, go to and briefly talk to a person that has raised their hand. So go and talk. And say hi. But what we want to say is for all the newbies, you are in a great community. We are a great community of scholars and practitioners, so welcome. So thank you so much for joining. If we see the number of people in terms of roles, there are lots of PhD students around, lots of professors, lots of people from industry. And if you look at the submission papers, we have nearly record numbers, which is actually really something we can be proud of. In terms of our acceptance rates, we try to stick to around 35% for full acceptance papers. So if you did get in, try next time. All my papers got rejected, but I'm going to try next year again. So in terms of the themes, I think you can see an amazing development of LAK over the years. Initially, we were talking about trying to shape the community, trying to look at understanding what is learning analytics about. And if you now look at 11 years down the line, we're not talking about learning analytics as a concept, we're talking about trustworthy learning analytics. We're talking about impact of learning analytics. How can we, what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, how can we change the people and organizations around us? And I'm really pleased, in a minute I will introduce Professor Yvonne Rogers. She will present an HEI perspective on learning analytics, and on a Friday, Ken Pudinger is going to come. Apparently yesterday he spoke, there were 5 people speaking to Bill Gates, he was one of 5. So I'm sure he will tell about this on Friday. And then we're doing something different tomorrow. We're not going to do another keynote, but we're going to do a very provocative debate. And we need your input. And we're going to try and see if that works, but it's going to be fun. So come and join us on Friday, Thursday. And while you're attending all these amazing sessions, it's really good to think about how can you as an individual contribute to the core themes of the conference. So what are the essential components of building a trustworthy system? How can we give our diverse stakeholders a voice? How can we, for example, keep the human in the loop? So all these questions that you posted at the conference are things that you could perhaps think about when you see another presentation. So it's going to be really exciting. And some of the themes of the conference about adaptive learning, self-regulated learning, social learning, effective learning. You have, of course, predictive analytics, but also a lot of machine learning, multimodal learning, NLP, collaborative learning, assessment, feedback systems. So we have an amazing range of themes running through the conference. There's so many fantastic people working on learning analytics, all the components. So go and talk and learn from each other. And it goes on and on and on if you think about the theme. So I can see you guys be really developing as a group in terms of where we were perhaps 10, 11 years ago, and now you see the themes that we're actually discussing. We will later announce the best research papers. We will also announce the best poster and demo. And we will also, and this is not on this slide, we will also give a prize for the best community scholar. So you can vote on this online before the conference, so that's going to be exciting. And there's lots and lots and more awards coming up. I'm sure you've seen the conference proceedings. I'm sure you've also seen the companion proceedings. And I'm very pleased to report that we're the only conference that is in the top 15 in Google Scholar, which I think is an amazing result. So thank you everyone for keep supporting our conference, which is really good. So just a big overview of what we're going to do. So we have the keynote, we have the posters, and we have the fire hose. We have an award ceremony and a keynote number 2. And on Tuesday we have the amazing debate. We have the solar annual general members meeting, and we will have to ask you to bring your cowboy boots. Because apparently there's going to be some kind of show in the Arlington backyard for those who have bought tickets for the conference dinner. If you haven't bought tickets, I think there's still some available if you're interested. Also, don't forget to upload all your photos in Whova, and this is the current leaderboard in Whova. So go and beat Sharista Sharam. because it would be nice because the person who's at the top at the end gets a nice prize at the end. So what we would really like to do while we're switching over to Yvonne is to get a little bit of take of why are you here? So why are you here at LAK? So if you go to tinyurl/LAK brainstorm, I'll take a quick picture of this. While we switch to Yvonne's keynote, it would be really great to just get a better understanding of why you are here. So while we're getting this switch sorted, I'm just going to give you this.
So while Professor Rogers is sorting out our technology and apologies, this is old school. Let me just get my reading glasses because we can't read otherwise. So I'm standing next to one of the giants of computer science. And it's a great honor to stand next to Yvonne Rogers, who is a professor at University College in London. And her talk will be about human-centered learning tools empowering versus analyzing students. And we've all been aware of ChatGPT and similar kind of technologies, and lots of people are really worried about this. And she will give her critical perspective whether we should be worried about this or whether we actually should embrace this as teachers. So Yvonne is the director of the Interactive Center of UCL. I think you pronounce it UCLIC, or is it not UCLIC? Yeah. And she's also the deputy head at the Department of Computer Science and a professor of interactive design. Her research is in the area of HCI, ubiquitous computing and interaction design. And you probably don't realize this. If you Google scholar her, I mean, the numbers that she has is absolutely beyond belief. But I think what's really amazing is we're standing next to a person who has ACM Chi Lifetime Achievement Award, a Royal Society Robin Milner Medal. She is an MRC Suffrage and Science Award, and she is a Fellow of the Royal Society. So we're standing really next to someone who is an amazing academic. She previously worked in the US at Indiana State, and she also worked at the Open University. So that must be an amazing person to work with. So without further ado, I'm really honored to welcome Professor Yvonne Rogers.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me up there? I'm going to keep the best till the last, and I'll start off by talking a bit about learning analytics, and then I will talk a bit about some of my research, and then I'll end with talking about ChatGPT. But I always like to do a bit of research when I'm giving a talk at a conference that I'm not a member of. So I had a read, or a scan, should I say, of the paper by Neil Selwyn and Dragan Gasovic on learning analytics that they did during the pandemic. I don't know if either of them are here today. It was fascinating to see that they had an email debate for 6 months going backwards and forwards between different perspectives. And it was music to my ears to see that one of the definitions they give is understanding and optimizing learning and learning environments with a clear focus on improving learning. And I couldn't agree more. And where my perspective is from a human-computer interaction, and very much in terms of designing new technology. So what I try to do is enhance and inspire learning through innovative technology, and I have done that for the last 20 or so years. So I'm taking that perspective, but bearing in mind this is what, to me, learning analytics at a broad level. I'm sure there are many other ways of thinking about it. So for my talk, as I said, I'm going to talk a bit about what I've been doing, and which is how do we design new tools to empower learning, and I'll talk about two core or fundamental design principles which have been very much at the backbone of my research, which is feedback and scaffolding. And then we'll finish off, so hopefully it will lead into a debate, to rethink how we teach our kids and how we do assessments in the era of generative AI, given that that's what is happening at the moment. So it probably, I don't really need to say this, but I think central to learning is how we give feedback. As a professor, I'm always dreading all the marking I have to do when the assignments arrive, because I have 100 essays or 100 reports, and it can be soul-destroying. But I know for my students, they crave feedback, whether it's a mark or the written comments. And so they wait with bated breath. And perhaps one of the biggest criticisms we get in our teaching is that they don't get enough feedback, they don't get it in time. What it is that we can give marks, scores, we can give written feedback, but we also meet with the students to discuss their feedback with them. And I think this is central to them being able to reflect on how well they're doing and so on. So most of it is in a written form. But during the pandemic, we all had to start using different tools for our teaching. And one I think that was most successful were some online tools that allowed multiple people to work together. And I don't know how many of you used Miro, but this proved to be highly successful in how we adapted it for our teaching when we were doing online teaching. And it provides a number of creative tools for diagramming, sketching, drawing, doing mind mapping, which is an important part of many students' learning, and the use of flowcharts. And you can just keep growing and growing what it is that you create on these digital whiteboards. And we used it in our teaching, and I think one of the most powerful things about this was how we could give feedback to each other. So one of my colleagues, Nick Marquardt, teaches a course in interaction design, and each year he asks them to come up with a project where they have to ideate and design a poster, and the poster has to be to redesign the interface of an everyday object. And he collects all of these posters, and they are from each year, and they're available for the students to have a look at. And they line up their posters, and then during a session they all look at each other's posters. And one of the key things they do is they provide feedback to each other through digital post-it notes. So the yellow ones are the students' feedback, and the orange ones are the tutors' feedback. And during a 2-hour session, the students go from one poster to another, they'll look at them, and then they'll add feedback, or the tutors will add it as well. And what we found was that this process of learning how to give feedback and to receive it was a very powerful way of learning in this context of online learning. And when we asked the students afterwards, they said it gave a sense of being in a place together, and that they could work simultaneously. They could go zooming into each other's posters. They could also look at the posters from the previous year and the year before that. And it gave them this sense of great awareness of each other and each other's activities that they didn't have through doing it just physically. So there was something about the pandemic that was actually very positive in terms of providing this feedback and a new way of learning. And I think the bottom line here is that providing feedback is just as important as receiving it. And we did give the students instructions on how to be constructive and not just say, what's that? Or, they had to think about how it's best to give feedback. And as we know, that students all crave positive feedback. So you give them good feedback, and then you have to say, well, perhaps you could improve upon something. But here, what was really key was this use of digital post-it notes on top of the work that they'd created. And just to recap, it enabled the students to compare all of the different tutors' feedback and the students' feedback on their work. And this helped them to reflect in situ and to improve their designs. It also gave the students confidence, a new skill, which is to learn how to give feedback to other students, and that's a really important skill. And as I said, to learn to give feedback is as important as receiving it. These are students at a university. What happens if giving feedback is really difficult for very young children? How do you give feedback to them, and how do they receive feedback? And part of my early research has been thinking about novel ways of providing feedback. And we were invited, I often get invited by people in the arts, the entertainment and culture to work with them. And I was invited to try and work with the education specialists at a theatre company in London called the Fevered Sleep, and they work in what's called the Young Vic. And they develop all of these interactive performances to encourage children to look around, to see the world, to think about it. And the way in which they do this is they create these immersive experiences. So this particular performance involved the protagonist going through this red door into the forest and seeing stars and all sorts of wild and wonderful animals. And the children, who are aged 4 to 7, were all given a tail to wear, and every now and again they'd be sitting on the floor, they'd start dancing, and they followed this particular character on his journey. And it was an hour-long performance. For kids of that age, it's quite amazing to keep their attention for so long. But what they found really difficult was, how do they know whether the kids understood, enjoyed? Well, they probably know how they enjoy it, but what they did get from this kind of interactive, immersive experience. And that's where we came in. We were asked to come up with a novel way of getting feedback from children. So how did we do this? Well, we didn't just design an online questionnaire. We designed what we called small talk. And this is a set of tangible boxes for children to answer questions and to reflect on the interactive performance that they've been through. And I had at the time some very creative designers and engineers working in my team, and they built these boxes here which had buttons and spinners and microphones and videos appearing. And the idea is that the children would come up to each one and touch the buttons or answer questions through these. So the first box just asks simple demographic, like how old are you? Did you come with your school or your family? And if the children couldn't if they couldn't read, they could press a button and it would speak to them. So here they are, all queuing up after they've been to see the performance, answering each of the boxes. They were delighted to be able to stand and answer in this way, and to spin and to press the buttons. I'm not going to go through each of the boxes, but just go to the last one, which was perhaps the one that really probed them, which was to have the protagonist appear as a video at eye level and asking them direct questions, and they had to reply by speaking into that big microphone on the right there. And questions like, hey, it's so good to see you again, what did you see? You were watching me on my journey, what did I do? Some things on my journey made me sad, what made me sad? So quite probing questions for the kids of that age. And what we found was that we set this up after a number of performances. There'll be about 15 or so children at each performance. And most of the children provided spoken answers. The ones who didn't were the very youngest. They still found it quite hard. But they were quite reflective and thoughtful. And they mentioned lots of things that they saw in the production. They said things about their emotional experiences, like how excited or how silly they felt or how happy. And then they also mentioned some aspect of the journey the protagonist went on, where there was a boat, trying to find family and so on, and what made him sad. And I think if we reflect on this type of approach to getting feedback, it's quite embodied, and the educationalists found it really insightful. They've had a real struggle getting feedback from kids, and they were able to glean more about very young children's perceptions and their level of engagement and what actually happened. And that the kids actually talked about specific things rather than, yes, I liked it, or no, I didn't like it. And as you saw in that photo, there was quite a lot of over-the-shoulder watching and how that influences choices. We also saw that with Miro, where the students were watching other students giving feedback. And that's a very powerful way of thinking about feedback. So just before the pandemic, we were asked again I'm very into designing tangible boxes, and I've done many, but this one we developed called EvalMe, and this is a device that we developed for teenagers to provide feedback on their experience. And this was developed as a way, again, to get over using just these sort of online surveys that you ask at the end of a class or a workshop. And the way in which it works is quite simple, is that children are asked a series of questions. In this case, it's 3, and there are these knobs here which they can turn from 1 to 12, and one LED will light up, depending on what that stands for. That can be really disagree to really agree, being the 12. And the templates can be changed between sessions. They're just under that Perspex glass. So this is how it works so they're answering a question here of, is data is something I can play with, and that's they're lighting up there. And this one is, information about me is valuable, obviously not for that person, and I'm having fun. And so it's simple as that. So how did we use this type of feedback device? Well, what we were asked at this time was to work with someone who was teaching computing, coding, and in particular part of the curriculum in the UK, which is some of the more difficult topics, which is the number systems or concepts. And we had someone who was from the dance school who was teaching dance. And what they did was they brought them together, those kids who are into dance and kids who are into maths and computing. And what we wanted to try and do was to develop a workshop where all of the kids got really excited by learning about the maths and also the dance. And then we used the EvalMe system as a way of getting feedback from them. But just to give you a sense of the workshop that we developed, it was called Data Moves.
Mike, do you want to join us in a circle as well? Join our circle.
Not any sound. So this is the beginning of the workshop, where there are about 20 kids, as I said, teenagers.
Meant to visualize movement in a responsive way. So for that we built these wearables. This one has a battery, a charger, and all the other necessary components inside. So that means we could actually visualize body movement in space. So since this one's only capable of displaying a movement in a single location, we use these base stations that have 8 time-of-flight sensors. The range of these sensors is 4 meters. That means if this is put on the floor, we have a diameter of 8 meters that people could stand around. And then we can visualize sound, different visuals, and how people just traverse space overall.
Working with Sue, I think we're going to combine movement and this physical computing tool to create a workshop. And the workshop's going to be based around data visualization, binary, and data representation for Key Stage 3 students. We're going to further develop that workshop with Studio Wayne McGregor and Suzanne from UCL. And then we're going to be delivering that in December to students. Yes. We hope the outcomes are an increased ability to understand these Key Stage 3 concepts, to learn and embed what are sometimes very abstract concepts and sometimes very things that are very tough to wrap your head around. But hopefully through the movement and through these tools, we're able to kind of create some more ways in.
Key Stage 3 is the part where students will be making decisions about their next steps in their education. And a lot of the time they feel that computing isn't something that's relevant to them or interesting to them, and hopefully presenting it in a completely different way will show them that actually it can be really creative. It can inform decisions about what they might do in other areas of their interests: sport, drama, music, choreography, art, all sorts of areas. So it connects in really nicely with all sorts of things. I think it's also important to say that if dance will help more girls be interested in computing, then perhaps computing with dance will help more boys be interested in dance.
It's very interesting, it's very intellectual, and I like the fact that it crosses over with technology, because it shows people that dance isn't just about the dancing, it also connects into lots of other areas and subject areas.
Technology to encourage children to explore these number concepts through exploring data visualizations, but we're also interested in how you could explore number concepts through, in particular binary and denary, through designing patterns of dance. And one of the things we did was we spent a lot of time doing co-design, where it wasn't us as the researchers telling the others who were the teachers and all how to use the technology. It was very much them talking with us. So we spent a lot of time structuring and scaffolding the activities that would take place. So they'd have some theory, they'd be able to explore the wearable devices we developed to look at the data visualizations. They then had to do some of their own work. So it was a real mix of things. And then we wanted to work out which of these they enjoyed most, which they struggled with, which were challenging. And that's where our EvalMe tool came into action. So we talked a bit about when should we ask the students what they thought. Should it be right at the end of the workshop, which is typical, or at the end of each activity? And in the end, we agreed to have the students use our EvalMe box after 3 of the sessions. And so you can see them using it here. And what again is happening is very much looking at what the other kids are doing when answering the questions and talking about it. And compared to ticking boxes in a survey, when you're giving feedback, interacting with that EvalMe box slowed down the students' thinking. They really did think about their answers. They were contemplating, did I enjoy this? What did I think of data? And they were comparing with the other kids. The teachers, however, thought it took too long for them to answer, but it actually gave the students breathing time, because the teachers like to pack in as much as possible. We also observed that some of the kids were very happy giving their responses publicly, whilst others wanted to do it privately. So one of the students who was in the workshop, who didn't make any eye contact with anyone and seemed quite disengaged throughout the workshop, took the box away and started to give quite a lot of feedback in the corner, to the point where we had to ask him to come back and give us the box back. But I think what we found was that this way of giving feedback was very effective for the kids to reflect. At the end, we got them all to sit down and we showed the data that has been collected through this EvalMe box as a summary of bar charts. And you can see one of them here. So they could see how all of the kids had responded for the different questions. And they sat round and they found it quite difficult to comment on the data. And part of this was that it's an unfamiliar task in getting kids in situ, in public, to talk about the data that they'd given. And they went very shy and quiet. And it was only when my researcher, Susan Leckelt, led them through each of these bar charts that they started to get more engaged and think a bit more. And they discussed some of the questions and drew conclusions, but she really had to lead them through the data in that way. But I'd just like to say that this way of thinking differently about feedback through the tangible devices has been a very powerful way of thinking about getting the kids to reflect. But as you know from being a part of this community, data visualizations are a very powerful form of feedback for assessing students' performance over time. Now, this is a graph that one of my colleagues gave me. I was just telling her that when we went for a walk, that this is what they use to assess their students and to give them feedback. You can see there, these are for different courses, and you can see the average, which is the bar, and then the red line, which is that particular student, whether they're above and below. And this enables them over the years to see how they're improving. And so that's something that has been very valuable for educators. So you can get see progress and steer their learning paths and next steps. But I also think that we should be thinking about how to give and receive feedback the students themselves, to be able to act it out, be able to share and look over the shoulder, helps them in their learning. And it's a very powerful way of learning. So how can we combine these two types of feedback in future AI tools? And in particular, with machine learning, how can we use that to provide different types of feedback when kids are learning specific kinds of skills? And if so, how? And I've been working in the last few years with a company who are a startup called Emotech. And in the last few years, they've developed all sorts of technologies. One was a robot, but the one that I'm going to talk about today was an AI-based learning tool to help Chinese students to pronounce English. Chinese students often have problems stressing the right stresses in a sentence. They may get the syllables okay, but not the right rhythm. And what they wanted to do was to provide them with a tool to help them pronounce certain stresses. And the way in which this tool works is it compares video and audio recordings of sentences a teacher speaks who has the right pronunciation with how well a student mimics them. I should say that the people who are part of Emotech are Chinese, so have had that experience themselves. And the way in which it works is it detects the mispronunciations by using machine learning algorithms, and it looks at the mouth shape and the pitch of the syllables and the vowels and the way they're spoken, facial movements when speaking, and also, as I said, detecting these mispronunciations. And I'm going to play a video so you get a sense of how the tool works in practice and how the importance of the feedback here.
Lessons into a new era. Our text-to-video technology can easily convert any written English into animation of teachers that has accurate lip movement.
Stephen lives in a village.
After this, the video demonstrates and creates the class through the teacher management platform. Students can scan the QR code to start the exercise.
I can't breathe in the clothes.
I can't breathe in the clothes. I can't breathe in the clothes.
Breathe.
They can practice this individually with the help of multimodal AI phoneme level scoring and watch the playback of the lip pronunciation.
Breathe in the clothes.
After completing all exercises, the system will generate a personalized course report based on every student's performance. During the practice, the teacher can check the learning progress in real time, according to the high-frequency mistakes that's summarized by the system to give a targeted explanation.
You do use it on their smartphone, a sentence, and this way is the brass felt cold against my hand. And then the student records themselves on the smartphone saying the same sentence, and then it compares and then gives feedback on how each word has been pronounced, whether it's matches or whether it's a mispronunciation. And this type of red, yellow, green feedback can be highly effective for specific words and to keep practicing those. And so it's been found that for Chinese students, they find this way of practicing can help them with the pronunciation of certain words. And then for the teachers, they've got this type of dashboard that can show for each student how much they've improved. So it provides both feedback for both. From a human-computer interaction perspective, these types of new AI learning tools, I think, raise some really important questions about how do you present the feedback to enhance or support the learning. Is it immediate? Is it delayed? Is it composite? Do you provide lots of feedback or do you break it down? And as you saw there, it's broken down by each sentence. And then do you use certain types of signalling like the traffic lights, red, yellow, green, or the 5 stars, which you've all become familiar with, as a quick way of giving feedback as to how well they're doing? And then what are the most meaningful dashboards for teachers? So that one was a standard dashboard where you can just see for each student. Then there's the content to practice in this particular learning tool. Do you provide textbook sentences? Do you provide jokes? We know humour is very good at helping students become engaged in the content. Do you provide tongue twisters, everyday narratives, or other types of content? And then there's the question of how to design the interface. What is the best teacher face to look at when practicing? Should it be the whole face or just the mouth, so they can look at the way the mouth is? And should it be real or cartoon-like avatar? And some of my students have been looking at these types of questions as to whether it makes a difference or has an impact. So that's the whole face, or do you just present the mouth so you can just focus on that? Do you have a cartoon avatar that is easy on the eyes, or do you have a lifelike avatar which can be quite stern to look at? And I think these are important questions, and we have found that there is some differences, that they prefer a cartoon-like, at least in the user studies we ran. Then there are many other types of questions, things like, do you show the same or different feedback to students who are quick to learn versus those who struggle to learn? And how you present that feedback to the students at the interface, I think, is key to keeping them going. So I've just given you some examples of how we can think of feedback differently. Second part of my talk is to look at how we might think of scaffolding and designing different interfaces, in particular chatbots. So how we might improve learning through scaffolding, through using chatbots. So what do we mean by scaffolding? I had the great pleasure of meeting Jerry Bruner a few times, and most recently, before he died a few years ago, in New York. And I've read a lot of his work. I've been very inspired by his work in education. But just for today, we'll take the well-known definition that scaffolding refers to the steps taken to reduce the degrees of freedom in carrying out some tasks so that the child can concentrate on the difficult task they are in the process of acquiring. And so to think about how you might help them in those difficult tasks. And the one that I've been looking at is how do you help people to make sense of data visualizations. It's just a coincidence that this conference also is very much concerned with data visualizations. And to think a bit about how you might help scaffold in that process. And I will start by drawing on work that has been done in the intelligent tutoring systems field, which has been, again, to think about how you scaffold at the interface students to learn by simulating holding a conversation with the learner and to give feedback and ask questions. One of the earliest types of tutors that has followed this approach was auto-tutor. How many of you are familiar with this Some of you are. This is one of the earlier versions, and I'm sure it's much improved, but it's based on having different windows by which a student can learn. So on the left is a bit of a scary looking avatar. It was one of the earlier avatars, but maybe sometimes having a scary looking teacher can be motivating.
Possibly. We've covered this segment pretty well, but something is missing. Is there anything you can add to that?
That is scary. And the way she blinks her eyes.
Let's see if I can help you. How can the word processing program operate efficiently?
So you can see that she's answering and the student is typing in their response, and then on the right is an image. And it's about how does the operating system interact with word processing program. Quite an important question there. Maybe it is, yeah.
I know you can do it.
Okay, I think
let's keep working and get through this. Let's try this.
Okay, she's quite good. But can we design newer types of conversational agents and chatbots that will be perhaps more friendly or more motivating to support learning? And independent of this approach, I've been working on how we design chatbots at the interface on a project called the VoiceViz project. And we've been working with clinicians at a hospital in London, the Great Ormond Street Hospital, who are overwhelmed by new amounts of data that arrived. And they want to be able to help train their clinicians to be able to look at the data and to analyze it and to be able to make sense of complex health data. So that's where we come in, is to start thinking about, well, can we scaffold, can we provide chatbots? So whilst this wasn't specifically for educational settings, I think a lot of what we did is relevant to educational settings. So we developed an interface agent called Visi, and Visi was designed not to have a heart-to-heart conversation, but to probe the clinicians to talk with one another. So the idea is that they'd be in a meeting together, face-to-face, they could have been online, and that the chatbot would probe them and push them to have more conversations. So in some ways to facilitate the sense-making and guide them where to look in the data. So this is typical data visualization they might have to look at with different graph lines here to think what's causing this trend to go up and down. So the scaffolding agent, we spend a lot of time thinking about, well, how do they probe? What questions should they ask? And we thought, well, what we want is to prompt teams of people to think a bit about data and to help them when they appear to be stuck. And we did this by asking open-ended questions such as, do you need a hint for analysing X? What do you think of this? Shall we move on? Did you consider the difference between variable X and Y? And what might have caused the sudden spike? So being open-ended was to try and get the humans themselves to answer the questions rather than trying to replace them. So the data that we worked with was obesity data, and obesity is a big problem worldwide, and this is 30 years of data that they had access to, and for different demographics, so for girls, boys, women and men, for adults and children, for developing and developed countries. And you can see that they can have a straight line increase there, or it can be sudden increase. And in HCI, we tend to run lots of studies, user studies, by using what's called a Wizard of Oz technique. And that's where you don't try and build the system up front beforehand, but you get a human to pretend to be the AI agent. And they can then press buttons at appropriate times and give certain prompts. And we had to come up with rules for when our Wizard of Oz would provide these prompts during the discussions that were being had by the teams. And to begin, we just had two simple rules. One was a team hasn't discussed a pattern or trend being referred to, and the second was there was a silence for at least 3 seconds, as if they appeared to be stuck. So this is how it worked. Visi was embedded in a data analytics software tool, and it could appear as a chatbot or as speech through a smart speaker. And we did look at differences, but I don't have time today to go through whether having a voice or having it appear as text on a screen makes a difference. It does make quite a difference. What I want to just say today is that having this type of probing chatbot encouraged the team to generate more hypotheses about the trends they were seeing in the data. And it did this by getting them to focus on the causes behind the different ways the lines increased in the graphs. And here's a quote which I think really sums that up. I like that the questions were on finding out more about the data. By answering the question, or even by looking at it, you would think about the consequences. And then you would ask yourself, why is this line more steady than the others, which wouldn't necessarily happen without the assistant? And here's an example of the type of discussion that would go on in one of our studies. So there's a silence, and Vizzy would pop up with this prompt. What might have caused the sudden spike? So looking at this here. And then the conversation was possibly it was globalization, getting lots of different foods, obviously electronics, computers, PlayStations, so children play less outside and get overweight, and so on and so forth. And so Vizzy here was triggering and prompting them to think a bit more deeply about what were the causes of some of these changes in trends. So just to summarize, for this design principle, thinking very much about scaffolding, when you design it as a probing sort of chatbot that can be embedded in the software, I think it can facilitate that type of learning by triggering more ideation and exploration of the data, and it can lead to better understanding and decision making. But importantly, what we found was it sparked more in-depth conversations between group members. So if you put that into an educational context, it could also be the case that we could have these kinds of prompts within a classroom to trigger kids talking to each other more. So that's the hope. Okay, so the final part of my talk that you've all been waiting for is the future of generative AI tools in learning. We've all read and heard in the last few months a lot about ChatGPT. How many of you haven't used the tool yet? Not used it? One of you? Two of you. Okay, so you're all aware. How many of you have not read anything about ChatGPT? You've all read about it. So you know that there's lots of discussions about the pros and cons, and it's raising the bar to what is possible in terms of how you write and think. Most students, if not all students, are already using ChatGPT. When I talk to my students, they'll say, yeah, what's the big deal? It's a bit like using a calculator. They're aware of its potential and its limitations. And in the last month or so, the International Baccalaureate has already accepted that it can be used. So it's there. The genie is out of the bottle. It's not going back in again. So we need to think about how can we use these types of new tools to transform learning in new directions. So in a way in which we try to use chat bots to encourage more discussion, perhaps we can facilitate using these, the art of debate and more discussion, and get students to think differently and even brilliantly through using these. And some of you might be much more skeptical, and I think it's important to have both sides of the argument. So I have read also articles that think it's a disaster in the making. There's a paper in a new pamphlet that's come out called Perspectives on Generative AI. And Rob Reich wrote this month this article. I don't think the person is in the audience here. Anyway, he's saying how learning to write better is inseparable from learning to think better. And if we rely more and more on these types of tools to write, students will not learn themselves to express their thoughts when writing, and their thoughts will become less clear or less cohesive. Some of us might think, is that possible? But he then goes on to say that if text models are doing the writing, then students aren't learning to think. And I would say that he's got a point. We do have a propensity to get lazy. But it's up to us. to think about how we can encourage students to think and write more using these types of tools. So I set myself a task thinking about this and took an essay title that we set for our MSc students who do a course in human-computer interaction. And the course is on future interfaces. And one of the essays that they set has this title, or at least it did, which is what key technology innovations do you envision appearing in our homes and our local communities in 2035? In what specific ways do you think these will transform the way we live? What would be the main challenges? You know, nice essay title that we set, gets them to think, gets them to do research. So what I did was put that into ChatGPT, and within 2 minutes it came back with this essay, which is pretty reasonable. It talks about 3 different types of technologies that could transform the way we live. One is autonomous vehicles, another is augmented and virtual reality, and a third one is home automation systems. And it gives the pros and cons. And you think, wow, if one of my students had written that, except we do ask them for 2,000 words, not 500, it's quite impressive. But then if you look a bit deeper, you start to see some patterns in the way in which the sentences are written. So the first one talks about autonomous vehicles. This could transform the way we live by ... However, the main challenge would include ... For the second one, it says, this could transform the way we experience entertainment, education, and social. However, the main challenges would include addressing concerns about privacy ... The third one, same thing, same pattern. This could transform the way we manage our homes. However, and it becomes very pattern-based, the way it's written. There's no personal feeling in it. And so what we need to think about is, why not let students go and ask ChatGPT to write these types of essays, but then to have a conversation with them, a bit like a chatbot. So ask them to, about its reply, where did they get the evidence for this essay? Could they provide the references? And could it write a more in-depth essay? What questions would they ask it, that's the student, and why? So starting getting them to develop these metacognitive skills, if you like. Then get them to do some fact-checking on the points made by ChatGPT. As you know, it can hallucinate, it can come up with all sorts of nonsense. So why not try and get it to do some fact-checking, find where it's made a mistake or said something. One of my students tried it out and said, what is Yvonne Rogers famous for? And it came back with a paper written in 1999 on emotional interfaces. I have never written a paper on emotional interfaces, but it was from Rosalind Picard. And I'm sure Rosalind Picard was probably a bit, would be a bit miffed if she knew that I had got her fame through ChatGPT. Anyway, that's by the by. I think what we can do is to try and get the students to get ChatGPT to make an error. How do you get it to make an error? How do you get it to hallucinate? How do you know when it's hallucinating? And then come up with counter-arguments to what it's just said. You just said these are the challenges, but what are the benefits? And then get ChatGPT to assess their responses and provide feedback on how they could do better. So I think there's lots of ways in which we can start to develop our assessments of writing. It could be also for writing code in the future, so that they start to develop these more critical thinking skills. And that's something that some of my students find they struggle with. If we can start them at a young age and work through this, I think I would say that we could probably help students to think better. So finally, as time is coming to an end, Simon, I don't know where he is, he's somewhere in the audience. Is a former colleague of mine at the Open University when I was there and when he was there. And I came across one of his blogs, and he was talking about how students will use AI tools. And it was, again, music to my ears. He says he sees new AI tools as a form of scaffolding, and refers to not Jerry Bruner's or Vygotsky, but to Schoen's work, which is very much talking about reflection in action by the learner, possibly also with peers, and the teaching coaching team. And the idea here is that they can develop the capacity to engage in more nuanced, more developed reflection in action using these tools by making improvised decisions. So I think we're on the same wavelength here, which is to think about how we can develop learning tools that somehow embed this type of scaffolding, and for us to think about how we can scaffold our assessments by which to get students to be more critical. So the way forward, coming to the end of my talk now, is let's think about designing a future generation of AI tools that both challenge and empower learners to be more creative, to be critical, and to be thoughtful. And let's think a bit more about how we can provide innovative new forms of feedback and scaffolding through these tools. And I've shown you today some of the attempts or ways in which we've tried to do that. And within human-computer interaction, there's always lots of new design challenges. And one of them, I think, is where we can work together, the different communities, is to try and think about how we augment human-human conversations. So a lot of research on intelligent tutoring systems has been about one individual and the system trying to help them to learn. But I think in the future, let's try and think about groups, collaborative learning, and to trigger different ways of learning. And then to model new kinds of human-AI conversation, where the AI knows when to explain, when to step back, when to suggest. What we don't want is another generation of Clippies, where Clippy, if you remember, Microsoft was one of the first interfaces, at the first agents at the interface that would say to you, it looks like you're writing a letter, can I provide you with a template? So we need to avoid getting annoying or getting in people's faces with these new types of tools. And to get students to think for themselves more by exploring what has not been said by ChatGPT. So finally, one of the things I'm most passionate about is that learning should have joy and fun. And you can see on this student's face, I've done a lot of work on physical computing where they learn about electronics and computing through using these toolkits. But you can see here she's got this sense of achievement, that she's done something that she didn't think she could. So let's bring back this joy and curiosity to encourage more thinking with new technology tools. And I'd like to thank all my colleagues over the years who've worked with me in this. And thank you very much for being a great audience.
That was amazing. So I want to give the online audience the first opportunity to ask a question. I'm just going to read it out, but if you could already start to think about a question and raise your hand, I will run around with the mic, and then then at least also the online audience can hear you. So there's a question from Alma Juncker from Germany. Do you think that immediate feedback is better than delayed feedback? To my surprise, there's been lots of studies that show that delayed feedback is better. What is your experience?
I think it depends on the context. It's a bit like giving kids rewards. Do you give them immediately or do you delay it? And I think if you're learning certain specific skills, like I showed, immediate feedback can be very useful. But if you're learning to write an essay, maybe just waiting a bit, because we need to do the marking, isn't such a bad thing. So I don't think it's one or the other. I think it really depends if it's a specific skill you're trying to practice. So when you're learning to play a musical instrument or learning a language, I think immediate feedback can be very good. And to learn in short, that's at least some of the research I've been looking at, short bursts rather than have hour-long. But yes, it will depend.
Great. Who wants to raise a question? Just mention your name and where you're from.
Hi, it's Simon from ED in the UK, and I wanted to ask about the Emotech example with you were comparing cartoon avatars to the more realistic ones. I felt like those realistic ones were falling into the uncanny valley. I expect half of us are probably going to have nightmares about those tonight. So I was wondering whether you also compared those to just real people. Obviously that is not scalable, so I know it's not a good solution, but just in terms of, I think we will potentially get past the uncanny valley at some point, so it'd be interesting to know whether that is worth pursuing or not.
That's a very good question. Uncanny valleys came about as a concept in Japan in the 80s when some of those lifelike robots were built, and they appeared to be slightly human but not human, and it made it feel creepy. And as you saw in one of the images we used there of a lifelike person, it didn't seem quite lifelike enough. And I think as we develop the technology for more, for simulating humans in these avatars, we will get to the point where it's still uncanny valley, but after that, they could look so human-like, or we get so used to them that it doesn't matter anymore. I think we haven't done that research of comparing real humans because we were interested in it being developed as a software tool. It wasn't as dramatic as we thought. I think people like to see the whole face, but also, sometimes they like to just look at the facial expressions and the mouth in particular. And so I think they actually said that they felt more comfortable having the whole head than just the mouth itself. In terms of the cartoon, I think the cartoon can exaggerate certain ways the mouth moves. So they're quite nuanced how they differ, but I think definitely as the graphics improve and the way in which we do the sort of modelling of the way the face moves, we will just get used to it, and we will wonder whether or not, is this a real person or not? And I think that will be really interesting when we get past that. So thank you.
Thank you. This is Yashi from NC State University. So yeah, great talk. Thank you.
I'm excited about the final discussion about the future AI tools and the generative AI tools part. And I'd also like to go to Simon's session to learn about their perspectives. But what I want to ask is what do you think about the role of education in the student-AI interactions? For example, can we just design some sort of curriculum or workshop to teach students about how to use the AI tools ethically? Would that be necessary in the future of your education, or at least some awareness of this?
But we don't interesting questions. Should we teach kids to use these tools ethically? We know kids do whatever they want and they'll test the system. So when some of our earlier educational tools were developed, we used some sensing tools and go out and sense things in the environment. First thing they did is they sensed themselves, see. We like to test the system, but I also think we do have we do need to teach them ethics, but we need to teach it in a way that's interesting to them. And I think at the moment it's rather dull how we teach ethics because we haven't really done it before. So we have relied on philosophy and certain examples, like the trolley example, which is, it's good to start with, but I think there's got to be other ways in which we can teach them about fairness, about trustworthiness, and about, if they find something shocking, what do they do when something appears? So all of that, I think, is, we as a society have to think more about how children, when they find information online or when they use these tools, what do they do with that? And that is a big discussion to be had, and I don't know the answer to that, but it is a big issue that's going to get bigger.
Hello.
Phil Winnie from Simon Fraser University in Canada. Do you perceive differences between to and fro of a conversation and feedback?
I understood the question was, can I say the difference between to and fro in a to and fro and feedback. I just got the wrong type of feedback there. I think there's been a lot of research done in conversations about turn-taking and the importance of promoting turn-taking. And what we've been looking at didn't happen before.
Turn the lab mic off and just use the podium. That might fix it.
Turn this one off?
Yeah.
Okay. There is, I'm sure, and you probably have some answer yourself, but I think for the purpose of when we start to design tools, we're trying to think of the context, the situation, the task, and how we can facilitate different types of conversation amongst the humans or amongst And then when they're talking with the agent, that might be a different kind of interaction.
Great, I might follow with 5 more minutes.
So, 1 or 2 more questions?
Hi, I'm John Rowe from NC State University, and I have a related follow-up to the last question. I was struck by the findings about the Visi system, and that kind of like more probing and prompting was beneficial. And it occurs to me that there's kind of a trade-off there with an agent that's doing lots of probing with kind of a reduction in student agency in the conversation. I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are about striking that balance between student agency and how you think about student agency in those types of AI-based conversational systems.
When you say student, I mean letting them take the initiative rather than the agent prompting them. I think that's why in our initial design, the rule was to let if there was a long silence to then prompt them, because we felt that was our assumption, that they had got stuck. And part of the problem is that they're not, in our study, they hadn't been trained to do data analysis. I think if you're well trained, you probably wouldn't need to have that type of prompt, but to encourage them to look at certain parts of the graph which they may not, it's an effective mechanism. But I think you're right, we should, like scaffolding, you should, it's there in the process of training, and then hopefully you can take it away, and that then they get their agency back. So I would see it as a sort of training more than taking, being always there. But in other contexts, it could always, you could always have agents there to prompt, depending on how complex the decision making was. But if you're trying to learn about something, in this case, how to understand those types of data visualizations, it can be used as a training tool.
Hi, Brent Benson from Harvard Business School. I was really curious how you, I'm really interested in the boxes and the different devices for eliciting feedback. What's the design process like where you decide like what sort of affordances to use and so forth in order to get at what you are trying to get from the participants?
A good question, because we use a mix of methods. One is to get inspired by the physicality of devices. So we went to the Science Museum and watched children and observe them using the different interactive exhibits to see what they did with buttons, what they did with things like that, and scrollers. And then I had a very creative designer who was thinking about, you need to have a mix. You don't just want to have all buttons that you can just press like that. So you need to think about spreading them out, but not to have too many questions. So it's a bit of serendipity. It was a bit of exploration, and it was a bit of being inspired by how physical devices have been developed in the past. In terms of the actual questions, that was very much in consultation with the teachers or with the educationalists about what they were looking for. So it wasn't very, coming just from us. It was saying, well, we'd really like to know more about this and about that. So we were informed about the specific types of questions by the educationalists themselves.
I'm mindful of time.
So we will have now coffee for half an hour. Could I please remind the presenters who are presenting at 10:30 to be there at the latest 10:15, so we can make sure that the online activities, etc. work. I apologize to the online participants if we didn't repeat the questions. We're learning still, so thank you very much. Could I again thank Yvonne for an amazing
She will be there from 10:30.
We will go much deeper into some of our studies. If you want to come there, great. And good luck and have loads of fun, guys.